Hi there, my name's Lauren, and this is my list of the top 10 things I wish I knew before sitting for the bar exam. Please like and subscribe, as I'll be posting some more videos in the lead up to the February 2023 bar exam. I will say at the outset that I sat the California bar exam. However, I think that each of these tips can be useful for you depending on whichever bar you sit, and it's also helpful if you're studying for any other exams. My hope is that you can hit the ground running and you don't waste the first 3 weeks of your study plan remembering how to study, and then you pay for it in the 3 weeks before the exam because you feel like you haven't remembered anything. This was the situation that I found myself in, and it was not ideal. Now, I've also included a bonus tip on one of the most crucial realizations that I had while studying, and that's later on in this video. Whether you went to law school in the US or you're a foreign attorney who just now needs to rote learn all of the content that will appear on the bar, the grind is the same. It is a strong 6, 8, 10, 12-week push, followed by 2 days of peak performance, and then a very anticlimactic 3-month wait until you get the results. The bar exam is uniquely difficult in that it is as broad as it is detailed. You need to have a breadth of understanding across the 12 topics that could come up, as well as very detailed knowledge of each of these subjects. My name is Lauren, and this is a list of the top 10 things I wish I knew before I started studying for the bar exam. My first tip is that it all comes down to time, both in preparation and on the day. Start studying as early as you can. Start writing the essays, start practicing the MBEs, and start practicing the performance test. And most importantly, start memorizing the content as early as possible. You want to have gone through the content 3 to 4 times before you sit the exam. So my rough approach to studying over a 10-week study period was to go through one subject for 2 or 3 days, and do that across all of the 12 subjects that were tested on the California bar. Then I would go back and spend a day on each subject consolidating. I would then go back after I'd done all the subjects again and do 2 subjects in a day. And then in the week or 2 before the bar, I was doing up to 3 subjects a day. And I found that this approach worked well because I kept on revisiting the concepts that I had already learned. It moves very quick, but that is just the nature of the bar exam. I've also dropped in what an 8-week study plan would look like. You get the gist. You need to make sure that you've gone through the topics 3 to 4 times each before the exam. If you do a bar preparation course, then they will set a schedule for you and make sure you follow that. If you're doing your own study, just make sure that you set a schedule at the outset and you take the time, it might take you an hour, to sit down and think about how you best will learn, and then stick to this schedule rigorously. Tip number 2 is to do a bar preparation course. Now, bar preparation courses essentially organize all the material that you need to know in a highly efficient manner, and they also set a schedule for you. They also offer great resources such as explanatory materials, and some even have performance metrics built in. I did Adaptibar and I couldn't rate it more highly. Other bar preparation courses include Barbri and Themis, and there's many others that you can find. Some people also use a private tutor, and these private tutors will give you their materials and they'll also set a schedule for you. My one tip is don't let whatever bar preparation course you do be your sole source of truth. It's important to have a well-rounded understanding of all of the content that will be tested. Now, I know that this is difficult when you're in the throes of study. However, if you can find textbooks that complement whatever bar preparation course you're doing, then this can be a great resource. I use some of Mary Basics textbook, and I found these to be very, very helpful. Tip number 3 is to start memorizing from day 1. Do not leave it till the very end. This is what I did, and I found that in the 3 weeks before the exam, I was incredibly stressed because I felt like I had remembered nothing. In actual fact, I remembered more than I gave myself credit for, but I just felt underprepared, and that was a big problem in the lead up to the exam. If you don't start memorizing early, it won't mean that you will definitely fail, but as was happening with me, it just leads to unnecessary stress. So start memorizing from day 1, and some of the tips in this video can help you with that. Tip number 4 is to understand the concepts each time you go through them. Now, this understanding will look different to every person. Some people learn through writing out the content, some people learn through doing flashcards, some people learn through explaining the concepts to their dog or partner, to their friends, to someone else who's sitting the bar, or even to the wall. Now, do whatever works for you. My only caution is that in the nature of how quickly the bar preparation schedule goes, you sometimes don't have time to write out the concepts multiple times. So I would recommend doing more dynamic learning techniques, such as using flashcards, and I've got more information about flashcards at tip 6. However, just do whatever works for you. Now, another thing that I'll say is that if you're struggling to understand a concept, try and apply it to a real-world example. For example, when I was learning contracts, I tried to understand the concepts of breach and cure in the context of returning online shopping, which is something that I've done very regularly. I felt that this helped to concrete certain principles in my mind, and it served as a good trigger when I got an MBE question that address something like breach and cure. I could just think about it in the context of something that I understand very well, and I found great success with this. If you don't understand something, don't put off trying to understand it. Take the time at that point to understand the concept and to clear any sort of confusion that you have, because then what happens is as you come back to revisit the subject or the topic or just the problem over and over again, you will be consolidating what you've learned, and it saves so much time as opposed to getting the question wrong 4 or 5 times. That is wildly inefficient. Tip number 5 is to get a 10,000-foot view of each of the subjects. Now, I used flowcharts, but some of my peers used huge pieces of paper that they would write out all of the content of the subjects, and they would stick this up on their walls, and they would use that to try and memorize the content. It also helped to show them how the different principles in each of the subjects all interacted with each other. Now, you might look a little nuts, but you're only going to look nuts for a few weeks, and I highly recommend trying to get a really good overview of what it is that you are actually studying. Tip number 6 is to use flashcards. I know I said to use whatever studying technique works for you. However, flashcards are such a great resource as it is a dynamic learning technique, and it actually gives you a little bit of freedom from very long, lonely hours at your desk. There's a ton of flashcard providers out there. Brainscape is one, and it costs about $10 per month, and all the content is preloaded, so you can just pretty much download it and start flicking. Adaptibar also has a great suite of flashcards for all of the MBE topics that are tested, which I found very helpful. Quizlet is also a great resource, and so you build your own decks and you put your own information in the cards. However, it pulls from all of the cards that have already been created. So it's not like you need to write out all of the content, as some of it will come up in the smart fill boxes. Now, another one is Critical Pass, and Critical Pass is great. So they have physical cards which you can get for $170, or they have an online version which I think is about $105, and this is a great resource. Importantly, what flashcards let you do is they let you be a little bit mobile, and you can flick through them while you're on your way to get a coffee, on your way from point A to B if you're taking something like public transport or you're in an Uber. And it just means that you're not confined to your desk. In the last week before the exam, I would throw everything that I was struggling to remember into flashcards and go for a walk and flick through them. One technique that I found to be super helpful is that I would review the flashcards and try and get all of them so that I was flicking through them and getting them correct at night, and then I would pick my phone up the next morning and flip through those exact same flashcards again, and then I would study for the day and then revisit them that night. And I found that reviewing them 3 times in such quick succession was really helpful for my memory. Now, you can't do this with all of the concepts and all of the things that you need to know, because it's just too much. So just, if you're going to use this technique, just use it for the things that you're really struggling to understand. Tip number 7 is to journal, and it's the boring kind of journaling. So MBEs are arguably the hardest part of the exam, and probably the most exhausting as well out of the 2 days, or at least that's what I found. The MBEs are detail heavy, often based on case law, which can be obscure, and you either may have not read the cases or you've completely forgot about them. And the worst thing is that the MBEs actively try to trip you up, and they give you answers that all look correct, but for some nuanced and crucial detail that you're supposed to know, it's not the best answer. And so the point of the MBEs is to choose the best answer, drawing on the knowledge that you've gained as well as using your own judgment. When you're starting to study for the MBEs, slow it right down. So if you answer a question and you get it wrong, spend the time to understand why you got the question wrong, why the correct answer is in fact the correct answer, and then why the remaining 2 answers are not the best answer. If you slow it down at the start, you will reap the rewards of this at the very end. Now, at the start, not only was I getting 90% of the MBEs that I did wrong, but it was taking me 4 to 5 minutes to go through each of the questions. And I used a journaling technique which I found to be helpful in remembering all of the concepts that I was learning. In my journal, which I did in a Word document, I would have a screenshot of the question and then a screenshot of the answer explanation. And then I would have 2 columns, one being why the answer that I chose was incorrect, why I thought it was correct, and then why the correct answer is actually the best answer that I should have chosen. As I said, it takes a little while, but you start seeing recurring patterns and questions as you continue to go along. And if you understand it at the outset, you will save time and you'll start to advance much quicker and much more accurately through the MBEs towards the end. Tip number 8, you will get quicker. Now, when I started, it was taking me 3 hours to do one of the performance tests and an hour and a half to do an essay question, and as I said before, 5 or 6 minutes to go through the MBEs. The point is that you will get so much quicker, so don't get frustrated at the outset. Each time you do the essays questions, you'll get quicker and quicker as you learn how to actually answer within kind of a rough template guide that you create for yourself or that maybe a bar preparation course gives you. Don't become frustrated with your slow progress, just study smarter. As I've said before, take the time to understand the concepts and truly drill this down to your memory. With the essays, make sure that you are reviewing the law and the logic behind how it is applied through any answers that you're reading. With the performance tests, once you learn the trick of how to master a performance test, you can pretty much replicate this out over a number of different fact scenarios that you could get given. With the MBs, as I said before, slow it right down at the start and you'll get much quicker as you get closer and closer to the exam and become more and more familiar with the content. My 9th tip is that your memory does come, although it does come late. Now, my memory I don't think kicked in until 2 weeks before the exam. And don't worry, don't spend needless hours stressing about the fact that you can't remember anything like I did, because it does come. You just need to be diligent with your study. By the time you've been through all the content 3 to 4 times, not only will you be familiar with it, but you'll be actively recognizing concepts, and you probably will have drilled far more down to memory than you thought. When I sat the exam, I'd studied one of the essay questions, I'd studied the concepts behind it briefly, and then when I sat in the exam, I'd never seen a question like it. However, I had gone over the concept a couple of times in my study so I could apply it. Be intentional about your studying, but also be intentional about your breaks, because it's in these breaks and in your sleep that your memory and your understanding of things becomes consolidated. Tip number 10 is to practice for the exam that you're going to take. In the month out from the exam, I would spend the weekends doing a mock exam. And so I would do the morning and the afternoon sessions under exam conditions. That is, I didn't have any water on me, I didn't take any breaks. If I needed to use the bathroom, I would run there quickly and come back, because that is what it is actually like on the day. Now, what this looked like was on Saturdays, I would do 3 hours from 9 until 12, and that would be my first essay block. I would then have an hour break, and I would do from 1 to 4, doing the next block, which was 2 essays and 1 performance test. Again, I'll remind you that I sat the California bar and this was the format that I had to sit. Then on the second day, I would do 100 MBEs from 9 till 12, and then I would give myself an hour break, and then go back from 1 till 4 under exam conditions and do another 100 MBEs. I then needed to take a really decent break, completely get away from it for at least an hour or 2. The first weekend that I did the practice examination, I was exhausted. I was genuinely catatonic. I couldn't get up from the couch. However, you do build up resistance to it, and it's kind of like training for a marathon, but this is a mental marathon, and you do get much better and you have much more energy at the end of each time you do it. Now, I would give myself a solid break, and then I would go through and I would mark the questions. With the MBEs, I would mark the MBEs and I would write out, as I said before with the journaling, I would write out why I got questions wrong and the logic and the law behind it. And I found this to be a really great consolidation exercise, and yes, it took a while, but I cannot tell you how worth it was. As I did a bar preparation program, my essays were actually graded. I had a private tutor as well as Adaptibar. So I was fortunate in that respect, but when I got comments back on my essays, I would take the time to go through it and sometimes even rewrite out and resubmit an essay for grading, so that I knew that if that concept came up on the actual exam that I took, I would understand it completely and I would have no issues in answering the respective question. The most crucial realization that I had while I was studying for the bar is that you can't trust everything that you read. Every year, the Bar Exam Authority releases the essays, and they have sample answers, which is essentially where the best of the cohort have been chosen, and these answers are provided with the essay questions for your review. Now, the important thing to remember is that the examinee may have gotten a few things wrong in their essay answer. However, on the whole, it was what the bar examiners were looking for, and so it was one of the more highly scored essays. These are not perfect essays, they're just the best of the cohort. So make sure that you use your sound judgment and critical analysis when you're reading through these essay answers and back yourself. Review the law where you had a different point, and then make a decision as to whether you back yourself or you think that the actual released essay addressed the topic correctly. This will be a great consolidation exercise. This is the same for the MBE portion of the exam. Now the NCBE, the National Conference of Bar Examiners, has a bank of roughly 40,000 or more questions, and they've only released a small portion of these into circulation. Adaptibar does NCBE style questions, and sometimes I would look at these answers and I would think, I don't think I agree with that. And this again was an exercise in going back, reviewing the law, making sure that my understanding was correct, and if I had an answer sometimes, on a very rare occasion, that differed to what Adaptibar was telling me, I would investigate it and use it as a consolidation exercise. Your best source of truth with the MBEs are actual NCBE questions. Now those were my top 10 tips that I wish that I knew before starting to study for the bar exam. Please like and subscribe, as I'll be posting some more videos in the lead up to the February 2023 bar exam. And if there's any content that you particularly want to see, please post below and I'll strive to pull this together for you.